OACNFers, the front runner. You might have heard me talk about it. Strides into the dog days of summer. I've been getting some nice texts and emails. They trickle in. It's really awesome. It would be really great. I hate having them do this extra ask, but such is this ecosystem we're in. Turning those texts and emails into online reviews, big help. Amazon or Goodreads. No offense here. I'm not going to read them because I haven't gone to Amazon yet. I don't know how many or how little there are. I know there are some. I won't touch them. Maybe that's irresponsible, but I want to protect my brain. Stay clued into the newsletters or follow along on the Instagrams at Creative Nonfiction Podcast or BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey. Also, tomorrow, August 16th, is a Saturday. I'm going to be the featured reader for a night of nonfiction for the virtual Hippocamp. Now, Hippocamp, when it was in person, was like my favorite thing to go to. It was amazing. Donna Tallarico does an amazing job there of literary citizenship and building community. It's an amazing thing. Right now, it's virtual. So visit booksbyhippocampus.com to register for the entire package. I think it's only $75 to hear everything over the course of the weekend. Or you can just attend a la carte, whatever sessions you can. My event happens to be free, though there is a $10 suggested donation. There will be 4 debut author readings, and then, ya boy, is the featured reader. I am not a debut author. I have long made my debut. It goes from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go do it.
And I was like, bro. We didn't say bro back then, but I was like, bro.
OACNFers, it's that time of the week. And it's going to be a double feature Friday. It just is. It's how we're going to get through these things. And I say it as if it's like a chore. I got to get through these. It's just there's so many that some people who have books that publish, they wait weeks and weeks and weeks for their interview to come. And you like it to be as close to publication as possible. There is no such thing as the CNF pod bump in book sales, but you never know. And you'd like it to be as close to pub date as possible. Anyway, it's the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, the show where I speak to tellers of true tales about the true tales they tell and the art and craft of telling true stories. Today, we have Julia Barton. Now, Julia was like the third hire or something, if I have that right, at Pushkin Industries, the podcast giant founded by Malcolm Gladwell. You may have heard of him. She's the executive editor of Pushkin and helped develop Revisionist History and Against the Rules, the latter by the journalist and uber bestseller, Michael Lewis. Well, Malcolm Gladwell also is uber bestseller. And I think Michael Lewis is like the one writer that Malcolm Gladwell is jealous of. And it just goes to show you how unbelievably insecure we all are, and that we all have insecurities and jealousies, no matter how freaking successful we are. Julia, quite literally, edits with her ears. I met Julia briefly at the Power of Narrative conference in Boston because she was generous enough to actually attend my little talk. She's also a Nieman Fellow at Harvard. And her talk followed mine in the same room. I think that's why she was in my room, because she's might as well be on the property. But I did not attend her talk, and I feel great shame about that because I know I would have learned a lot from it. I had it circled in my program and everything. But my battery was in the negative after my talk, and I just needed to disappear. The plight of the introvert. I could have learned a lot from her talk. It was about the grammar of audio stories and just audio in general. And, you know, as you know, I have a podcast, and it would have been nice to hone my skills a little more. So anyway, and my way of atoning was inviting her on the podcast to talk about her auditory journey. Show notes to this episode and more at BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey, there. You can peruse for hot blogs and sign up for my 2 very important newsletters, the flagship Rage Against the Algorithm and the new one, Pitch Club. Issue 3 of Pitch Club recently dropped with Kim H. Cross. I've got a flood of new subscribers. It's starting to... the flywheel's turning on it right now, which is kind of cool to see. Pitch Club is just where I interview. I invite a long-form journalist on the show, and they share the text of a pitch, and I have them audio annotate things. I edit myself out, so all you hear are these nice little audio clips at various parts in the text. So you can learn, you can get some insight into how they're thinking about these pitches that sold stories. And it's the thing I wish I had as a baby freelancer, in 2012 or whatever the hell. It'll never cost a dime. Let's keep doing it. All I ask is for your permission, because platform is currency and I can leverage that into dollars. Both are first of the month, no spam. So far as I can tell, you can't beat them. Like, you can't. Try. Just try. You can't do it. You may also elect to check out patreon.com/CNFpod to throw some dollar bills into the CNF Pod coffers. You can earn some face-to-face time with me if you just want to talk some things through. Sometimes that's what you need. You need, like, for lack of a better term, sometimes you just need a literary therapist. So it's like you know how to write, but sometimes you just need to talk things through and talk to someone who's going through it and who's been there to some extent. Do it if you dare. Check it out, man. Helps keep the lights on here at CNF Pod HQ. And damn it, the lights just flickered. So Julia has a cool newsletter called Continuous Wave, which is a weekly newsletter exploring the forgotten history of broadcast and all electronic media. It's very specific, which is what you want from a newsletter. She's the founder of RadioWright, and that's right with WRIGHT, kind of like the Wright brothers. She's at Bartona104 on Instagram, though it's private, so I don't know how much luck you'll have knocking on that door. You'll hear her name at the end credits of Against the Rules, among other podcasts, and you know how important it is if you're mentioned in those credits and how integral you are to the experience you just had. And when I heard her name, I was like, damn, I got to talk to her. And we got to talking about editing audio stories and how it's different than print. What's the ideal length for a podcast, be it narrative or interview? The cost of revisions, which is way more in audio than print, as you might imagine. Scratch mixes and dry mixes. Animal versus mineral editing. What is that? Picturing the ideal interview in your head, and a lot more. It's really rich conversation about audio storytelling and her journey from, a baby print writer into someone who really thrives in audio. Parting shot on the universal journaling theory, and then update on Sister Kevin. But for now, let's cue up the greatest montage of writers you'll ever hear. Riff.
I don't even know what's in my tool belt, let alone how to use it.
Yeah, I mean, what is this genre if not hybridity?
I respect that sentence.
Is that an option? Because I choose that option.
This is going to have to interest somebody somewhere other than me.
Yeah, I just interviewed Anna Sale, host of Death, Sex, and Money podcast that's been around for more than 10 years, I think, or about 10 years. And she's a very skilled interviewer. I asked her, it seemed like when the show started, she had a lot more post-production narration, kind of summarizing things, pulling things together, reflecting. And now it's much more kind of question and answer based. It's still produced. I mean, there is post-production, there's a little bit of scoring, there's, lots of things like that. But she actually said, I feel like too much of that narration in post is a little bit like cheating. I mean, she didn't use that word, but that's what she said. Yeah. It's sort of like sometimes it's now Ologies is a different show. It's got a lot of information as well as kind of like human relation vibes in the interview part. So I can understand why that's a necessary format. It's not good or bad. It's just interesting that Anna Sale, I think as she got more comfortable with her role as pure interviewer, she's not a reporter like she used to be. I mean, she's still doing journalism, but it's a different format. And that she kind of doesn't want to have that safety net anymore of the post-production narration. It's also a pain in the butt for the producers to have to, kind of like figure out where everything's going to go and how the narration flows into the tape and so forth and so on. So,
yeah. Well, I think even, backing up and rewinding the tape somewhat, and just doing some cursory research, I just, saw in an old like Nieman thing that you wrote that you got your start in audio in '95 while you were enrolled in a master's program for nonfiction writing in Iowa. So I don't know, just take us to that moment of what you were drawn to at that time and how you eventually just got sucked into the stream of audio.
Yeah, so I did get an MFA in nonfiction writing at University of Iowa in their English department, which was a really great, fascinating time. And, people would come from magazines and talk to us about, sort of life in the business, or agents would come, or, authors would come through town. And so I had this sense of nonfiction, I was reading a lot of essays and so forth, that it was like a very special club that I may or may not be able to get into. This was just at the cusp of internet, sort of publication. So there was Salon, Slate was starting, but it wasn't this sense of like, you can just go out and publish yourself, right? There was still like a lot of gatekeeping. And I was reading the New Yorker religiously. And I remember a guy, an editor from the New Yorker, came and talked to us about, kind of like what they were looking for and so forth. And of course, everyone wanted to know how to pitch him. And he was like, well, there's a fax line for pitches. And we were like, great, what is it? He's like, I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, God.
We already have too many pitches anyway. And I was like, bro. We didn't say bro back then, but I was like, bro. And also, my parents had been in newspaper journalism. Actually, my mom was a music critic at the Dallas Times-Herald, which had, kind of just been shut down in the early 90s. So I felt like burned by newspaper journalism, and that it was like on a slide, nowhere good. And so that was also like discouraging to see. And I was just like, what is this? This is bullshit. So that was happening. And meanwhile, I ran into a friend from college. I went to Oberlin College, and my friend Lisa Phillips was on campus. She just materialized. And I was like, what are you doing here? And she was like, what are you doing here? She was working at the local NPR affiliate, WSUI, as a graduate assistant and finishing a degree, I think. And so she recruited me as a board op. So I had started just this minimum wage job, announcing stuff on air after the station had already powered down at night. So nobody could hear me. Like 15 people could hear my horrible, horrible board op skills. But I was just like, this is maybe an alternative to this sort of arid nonfiction world that I'm looking at, this world of magazine and newspapers sort of hoarding their resources.
Yeah.
And so I set myself to a couple of public radio conferences. There was something called the Prendy Public Radio News Directors Institute, I think. And so I went to a couple of those, and everyone was so nice. They were so like welcoming. And then I figured out why. It's because they paid like terrible wages.
We pay in
I was making minimum wage. Yeah, I was. Then I became a graduate assistant, sort of reporter. I took my friend Lisa's job when she left. And so I got to report for the networks and things like that. But we were still editing with reel-to-reel tape, and it was like incredibly frustrating. Yeah. So I was on the fence about it, but then everyone was just nice, and I felt like this welcoming energy. And I found that radio and podcasting have that, elements of that to this day. And so there's always been a community element to it. And we see each other, and we're happy to see each other, and we complain about stuff. And it's what I kind of thought newspaper and magazine journalism was, and might be for many people, but I just found it through audio instead.
Yeah, essay you wrote, right around that time is when This American Life is starting and gaining altitude. And that really changed the game. And that's no news for people like us who are pretty steeped in this, but that was pretty revolutionary at the time. Yeah.
And I was the board op at 6 a.m. on Sundays, I think. I can't remember. It was like some weekend morning at 6 a.m. and that's when we aired the show. Very early in its run.
Yeah.
We were running it just at a time of the morning when no one could hear it, but I was listening to it, and actually it was so distracting because it was so interesting that I would tape the feed so that I could listen to it later. So I basically was like podcasting it to myself. And then I actually wrote about Ira and those guys for Salon in 97, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And when you say board op, what is that for people who might not know?
Oh, so you're the person, the local operator who's sort of announcing the next program. You're maybe reading a little local newscast or reading the weather. You're playing forward promotes for other shows that are coming. You're following a log that the program director has given you. And then you're just kind of like, you're also doing stuff in the background. You're checking the signal. You're checking off all these logs. You're at an AM station, you're powering it down at night. You're recording programs for the next day off the satellite feed.
Okay.
You know, you're doing all this little busy work. You're basically running the station. It's a great way to get into audio production because you really have to do everything at a small station.
Oh, cool. Very nice.
Yeah.
And, all right. So you're starting to find your people. You're realizing that the print world is like draconianly gate kept, and that's not cool. And so, but you're finding your people in audio. So, you know, and so as you're feeling kind of the warm embrace of that, you know, what's the next step for you?
So after that, my boyfriend, who's a public artist, we moved to Philadelphia, and I basically did the same thing that I did at WSUI. I did like board op shifts. I was like, I'm available, whatever you need, you know. And so I would just do like morning edition, assistant, filling in, stuff like that. And then trying to get a reporting job. And that just basically means hanging around as much as you can in the newsroom until a job opens up and they hire you, and then you get paid nothing. But, you know, there was only like 3 general assignment reporters at WHYY at the time, which was a massive market. So every day you would just come in and they'd be like, go to City Hall, go to this, go to that. And, you know, you would try to find time to do stuff for the networks. I mean, we had a political convention in Philadelphia, so I was filing reports on, you know, protesters being arrested, things like that. And there was always something disastrous going on in Philly. So it was just like nonstop. But again, I learned a lot at both stations where I worked. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. They were going through the process of moving from analog to digital. So we were, you know, cycling through different systems that were crashing, and yeah. Oh my gosh. It's always a very tumultuous time in broadcasting. It seems like there's always like 7 different disasters at once. But again, I made some really great friends at that station, and we were all in it together. It was just a really interesting place, and you know, Terry Gross is there. That shop was there, you know, trying to survive all these upheavals and moving to a new building and so forth and so on. And so I also would do a thing where I would just ask people, like if I, you know, did a piece for the network, for Marketplace or whatever, I'd ask if I could, you know, if I was in town, if I could come sit in on a live feed of the show. So I think very early on, I was very interested in learning about this medium and learning from the people who were doing it at a level that I wasn't ready for yet, but I wanted to see how the folks at NPR, at Marketplace, constructed their shows. To me, it was fascinating.
Yeah, there's an element, you saying construction, and there is this element of blocks when you're moving things around. I use Hindenburg as my DAW, but a lot of other people, they tend to use Pro Tools, I think.
Hindenburg is the best.
I
endorse.
It's wonderful. Yeah, I've been using it for probably a good 7-8 years. I started with Audacity, like most people do, and went for as a freebie. But then, Hindenburg came on my radar, about 8 years ago, and I love it. It's like having a little engineer. It levels things out nicely. It's it's pretty great. But yeah, to your point of construction, it's like what I would give, just because I'm kind of a nerd like this, to like sit in on an edit, like when you're putting together an episode of working with whoever, be it This American Life or like in your case, working with Michael Lewis, like what that looks like on the street, just the music here, the narration here, all this tape. It's got to be wild and overwhelming to look at, especially for someone who might not be too familiar with that degree of complexity.
I was a producer for a while in public radio, but I've always been more drawn to the written side of it and the sort of listener notes side of it. So it's story editing. So I don't do any of that production stuff anymore. I'm not even in the Pro Tools sessions or the Descript sessions that, Descript is this program that allows you to edit text to audio. So a lot of people use that like for preliminary edits, and then they port it over to Pro Tools for final production.
Okay.
The thing is, like, I do know what those sessions look like, and I do know what I'm asking of a producer. If I say, let's move this, or let's change the scoring bed, or let's rewrite it at the last minute so your scoring is all screwed up.
Yeah.
I know what I'm asking, and I'm trying to explain it to people in a way that helps them understand why it is important. And also sometimes I'm also like, it's too late. I'm not going to give that note. It's just not okay to ask for that at this stage. Or I am defending the producers against a host who suddenly got insecure about something and wants to tear it up at the last minute. I'm talking them down from that ledge because I know exactly how much work it's going to demand of them. I'm also, trying to collaborate with engineers and take their notes seriously. The engineers are the people who are mixing all of those elements together at the end. They may feel like a scoring choice that a producer made is like not working, and they have an idea to like take out one of the stems, or they may want to swap it out with a different scoring bed, and I'm there to A/B test it with them. Do you know what I mean? So like my role as an editor is all of those, like it's a kind of like the equivalent of a director in a movie in some ways, where I'm like helping all of these elements get through the pipeline to the listener while trying not to forget what the listener's encounter is like. And that's very hard for all of us, because the more familiar we get with the material, the more times we've heard it, rewritten it, thought about it, argued about it, the less we're able to approach it the way the listener does, which is like, I'm in my car, what's in the feed? Entertain me now. Okay, you're boring. Next.
Yeah. Well,
that's all you get.
Yeah. And how often, or, for a particular episode, call it a 30 or 35-minute episode or whatever, how often are you, listening to that almost beginning to end before it publishes? With
a narrative show like Against the Rules or Revisionist History or one of those shows, probably at least 4 times, but more, maybe, and also more in little sections. So generally the process that we worked out at Pushkin and most other narrative shops have a similar process, and there may be in fact more rounds of notes. It depends on the complexity and whether it's a series, that's all supposed to fit together with cliffhangers and so forth, or whether it's standalone episodes. But you'll have generally the host and the production team just listening to tape together, and I will try to stay out of that part of it because I don't want to get exposed too soon to the material. Then they'll pull it together in a script form, and then we'll bring it to a larger group, and that's the table read. That's kind of the first draft iteration, and it's meant to be loose and open. But I will come to that. Generally, that's my first exposure to it. I may have talked through it with people, but I'm trying not to get too close. I will time it and give people a sense of like how it's coming in. And then the hosts and the producers are looking at the sort of reading the room, whether the room is on Zoom or in person, kind of get a sense of like, is this stuff that we thought was hilarious? Like, is it funny to these people? So it's like the first sort of encounter with reality, and it's very useful information. Once we get through that, then we have a conversation about it. And my job as the editor is then to try to focus that information into a actionable plan that the host and producers can take back to the drawing board and like rewrite. So then they'll do a rewrite, hopefully quickly. And then I will get a version of the script that's what I call line edits. So this is just me with the tape kind of going through and listening to the tape, kind of get a sense of the flow. And I will suggest rewrites and just basically trying to train the writers. And it's funny because now I'm working with writers that I previously couldn't fax them, but, fax their publications. But I'm acknowledging their expertise and their ability to tell great stories, but that when it's coming to people through the ear, sometimes things need to change, right? There's just sort of different laws of physics involved. So I'll go through and do line edits in suggestion mode. So basically my work just looks like a Google Doc like any other editor. I will also be listening to the tape. I'll sometimes tag the producers and be like, is there something else this person said? Or like, is it possible to cut off this moment like a little sooner before they go off on another digression, things like that. Then the host or the producer will go through those edits, and then basically we send it off to the fact checker at that point, and we do something let's just call the scratch mix. And the scratch mix is a way to get it off the page. So the tension in this form of editorial process is trying to get it off the page as much as possible and into our ears, so that we don't make the cognitive mistake, which is very easy to make and understandable, that the thing on the page is the production, right? Because the listeners are not going to be reading along unless they need to for some reason or want to read a transcript. So the scratch mix now can be produced fully in Descript with an automatic voice, a synthetic voice, which I find creepy, but also it's just so much easier on the producers. We used to have someone read all the tracks and then like cobble them together really quickly. But that is something I can then take out for a walk. I can then think about it. I can be like, is it landing? Like, how long is it taking for us to identify the show? Is that too long? Is it fine? All these questions.
Yeah.
Are the jokes funny? And I just notice my reactions. And so a lot of what I talked about at Power of Narrative is like, you can do this too. You can notice when you're getting bored. You can even note the time code. You can be like, I'm distracted. Suddenly I have this urge to go check social media. Like, what is happening to me? So I'm trying to do that as I'm out walking. And then I go back and I put in notes while the fact checker is also putting in their notes. And we're doing all of this in service of, because it's a narrative show, the host has to come in and perform it. And we want it to be as close to finished as possible so that the host doesn't have to keep going back into the studio. And that is the main difference between, storytelling for the ear and writing, is that the cost of revisions is so much higher. Because not only does the host have to come back in because we got something wrong and, we caught an error, or, their voice was scratchy or whatever, they have to come back in and re-perform it, which is, they're not in that same space anymore. They've moved on to the next episode. They're kind of pissy about it. But also their voices change over time. Your voice changes during the course of the day.
Yeah.
So when we have them come in and do what we call pickups, you can hear them sometimes in people's podcasts. Their voice is like a different person, and it's because the pickups were done in the afternoon and the thing was tracked in the morning, and originally the bulk of it. And so we try to avoid that as well. It's not possible because things are fluid and changing, but we're just trying to make it as easy as possible, especially hosts who are, writers and have lots of other projects going on, trying to get them into the studio or get them on their iPhones or whatever it's coming down to now is painful, and it slows the production process down. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Well, you taking a raw track or a raw episode out on a walk is like really astute, because you're putting yourself in the shoes of the listener, because a lot of people are doing something else. You're usually walking a dog or doing dishes or whatever. And so, that's a really, really smart move as an editor to be like, to act as a listener and be a proxy for listener. Okay, this is where I'm drifting. You can make really good notes. And how are you making those notes when you're on a walk? Are you carrying like a notebook with you? Like, oh, this is dragging here and so forth.
Yeah, sometimes I will, or I'll just use the notes app on my phone. But I also find, like, if I have time to just walk around with it, I mean, I'm working on episodes generally that are like 30 minutes, that if I go back in and just like, I'll stick it in the whole thing in Hindenburg and then basically listen to it again, and then, sort of make my notes as I go. And I'll have the script to remind me of where stuff is. That, generally speaking, I can rely on memory sometimes. Yeah. If I have the luxury of time, if I know that I'm just going to have to run in and just like put in quick notes. Yeah. And all of this is time consuming, right? Because then after this stage, and then after we put the pickups in, then there's a mix. And there may be 2 rounds of mix notes. There's the first round, which is what we call a dry mix. So we've got the tracks and we just want to listen to it for pacing and also to start thinking about scoring. Like, oh, I could hear a scoring come in here because this is a transition. Oh, I would like this character to have a sort of theme attached to them so that when they come back at the end, we kind of like subconsciously and are anticipating them before they step back on stage. The dry mix can help make that process. I can give some guidance to the producers, but I'm not going through all the music beds and picking out music beds for them. I like they deserve to have that fun, and even they can ignore all my suggestions, right? I'm just hearing them in my mind. So that's one round of mixing. And then once they've got all the scoring in, before we go to the final phase, which is mastering, which is where you make all the levels even and like kind of like sweeten up people's voices so that they come to the front in a pleasant way, and that it's matching the specs of whatever platform it's going to, things like that. I will give one more round of notes just in terms of mostly hands off, but if like a scoring bed is getting distracting, often producers will they get a scoring bed and it's like 1 minute and 10 seconds long and they're just like, I just want to lay it in there and then it will resolve when it resolves, in the file. I don't want to have to start playing with cutting music because that's a pain in my butt.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, you know what? I know that I wish this worked, but it's not working because suddenly it feels like it's going on too long. I don't know if you've ever had that experience when you're listening to a scoring and you're like, why is that orchestra still playing in the background? Like,
Yeah.
I've moved on, you guys. I've moved on.
For sure.
Get out of the room.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'm having a hard time picturing a particular interview or podcast I've listened to where I noticed that, but I noticed it mine with the music that I track under my intros and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, this is, at this point, I'm like, I know it's low in the mix and low volume, but like you should be gone by now. We don't need the guitars anymore. And I just like, I only work with basically 4 tracks in any given thing, so it's always it's a pretty simple fix for me to just drag things over and fade it out and be done with it. But yeah, it's through this repetition that you develop an instinct for it. Where I don't know, I guess we kind of think of instincts as like innate, but you do this enough and like you can strengthen an instinct you have. I suspect that's where you're drawing a lot of your editorial eye. It's just it's instinct at this point, I imagine. Am I right?
Yeah. And then, but you also can notice when that instinct kicks in, right? So oftentimes I'll ask for scoring to just go out for a little bit when we've got a lot of statistics, facts and figures, or historical information, because a different part of my brain is working now. It's not the emotional part where I'm just like writing along with my feelings, right? Like I need to grasp something. And so the music is suddenly getting in the way of me doing that. So that's a note. I will try to give a note as to why, just so that people understand it's not just me, being insecure.
Yeah.
Like, is this good enough? Or I just like to give people tasks, and waste their time. It's like actually, and if it's my fault, like I made the note to put scoring here and now I'm saying no scoring, like I try to acknowledge that. Or if I said to cut something and now I want it back, I'm like, I'm sorry, I know this is my fault, right? Because it's a collaborative process and I want it to be fun to collaborate on something. And I also welcome, other people's feelings. Like if they're just like, actually, I like this, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not the only listener, people have different reactions, but there are certain patterns that I know producers get stuck in. And that's why I think it's helpful to have someone who's not in the session, because also they're looking at this wall of sound. So it's exhausting. And I'm able to be on the outside and hear it, right? And then reflect notes back to them.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at too is this transom essay you wrote a while ago at this point, but it's very evergreen. This idea of like a animal and mineral editor brain, and I don't know if you remember what you wrote and just that idea. I think you're kind of alluding to it here elliptically, and but maybe you can define what it means to be the animal versus the mineral editor, and you where you stand on that continuum.
It's a type of producer, right? So like many producers are coming at this form, the spoken word audio form from a musical background, right? So they're thinking of words that the spoken word track is another musical track, right? It's more emotional, less verbal. And then there's this whole other strain of people coming from print journalism, and they've got sort of explainer tendencies, right? I would probably put myself in that camp because I'm always the person who's just like, yeah, that character's going through that. But like, what about the handoff from Hong Kong, from, the UK to China? I want to know more about that. And they're like, you do? But we have feelings going on here. Like, come on, isn't feeling? And I'm just like, yeah, feelings are great, but I also want to learn something from the feelings, right? The context. I want history. So it's a balance between those two things. And I think being able to identify which type of producer you are, it's not just an editor, but any type of producer, reporter, so that you can think about, well, like, how can I, balance that tendency out with, I have to acknowledge that like a character story is super compelling. People want that. But then there are also people who resent and feel manipulated by just vibes, right? And you're never going to be able to satisfy everyone. But if you kind of know where you're coming from and what your tendencies are, it can make you maybe more open to collaboration.
In another Transom essay, you quoted Tom Stoppard, was I believe a playwright, and you're talking about it's about controlling the flow of information. This is him saying this, arriving at the right length, at the right speed, and in the right order. And that to me strikes me as the holy trinity of what it means to be a good audio editor.
Yeah, it's so much is about pacing, especially in the later, phases of an episode's production. It's like, this is great, but it's coming too late in the episode. I'm getting impatient and you're starting a whole new thing. That doesn't mean you can't do it. You should just know, like, you're going to have to do a better job. It's not just like, I don't want this here. Like, I feel the credits are coming, soon. And I see, the end. It's just like when you get to the end of a book, you're just like, wait, why is he starting a whole new thing here? What is going on? Is this a trick? Yeah. So pacing, I think, and that it was great to see that because so much of radio actually came from theater, like a lot of, now that I'm all about studying old radio things, it's really fascinating to see how much from the stage, directly, just like walking down the street, stage actors, playwrights, public speakers, all these people who were using the theater space of New York just migrated, especially during the Depression, into the network studios because that's where the work was. And so this entire culture of theater, branched out and became part of radio, which then became television.
Something you said a little while ago about the cost of revision. And I'm just thinking, like, how can we make those costs or like decrease those costs? And I'm sure some of it comes from having very skilled reporters and, getting good tape, not having to go back to people and you kind of have to reintegrate tape. So how can reporters help themselves and by extension be helping their editors?
Oh yeah, this is a topic of perennial fascination for people, especially public radio people. And so I used to work with all these guys from Planet Money, Jacob Goldstein, Robert Smith, and so forth. And they're great about picturing the ideal interview in their head, even if it's just like day of. It's kind of like, wouldn't it be great if I encountered someone saying this, or I got a scene in which this happened? And just that act of imagining it can help manifest it because you kind of know why you're going out into the field. So that's one big thing. The other thing is just preparing, right? Like, reading up and knowing the reason why you're approaching somebody, so you're not going on fishing expeditions so much, and then also listening, right? And this is partly why I like being an editor more than a reporter, because when I was a reporter, I would then transcribe my tape. We didn't have auto transcription back in my day. And so logging my own tape was the most painful thing because I could hear all the leads I didn't follow. I could hear all the questions I didn't ask. So I was both doing something that was tedious and I was hating myself
Yeah.
in the process. I mean, not always. Sometimes I was just like, yes, this is so good. They said it, but I feel like because I was just like naturally too shy to be a good reporter that I was missing things.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I feel the same way when I go through tape, because I have a tendency to ask a question. I just kind of let people go, and I won't interject. But I'll have my notebook, and that's usually where I'm putting a pin in things to come back to. But I suspect that's really hard. Like when you're out there with a recording kit, and you've got your headphones and your shotgun mic and your little Zoom recorder. You can't really hold another notebook to like put a pin in something. So I feel like it's all the more difficult to like try to keep those multiple things going in your head as a radio or a podcast reporter, and try to get the good tape, because then you go and log your tape. You're like, oh shoot, I really should have followed up on that thread, because it was rich. It was there for the taking, and you just get swept up in this river of information.
Well, you can now use portable lav mics, so that will leave your hands free, or even a mic stand. But yeah, it's a different mentality, right? Because you're also you're trying not to encourage them verbally, right? You learn very quickly to stop saying the whole time, because then it interferes with your tape.
Yeah, exactly. It's when I wrote an essay for Writer's Digest, like the writer's guide to being a good podcast guest. And well, everyone for one, writers like need to get a microphone. You might not host a podcast, but you're going to probably be on them. So get a good mic, because you want good audio. But it's having mic awareness too. Like often, if I'm listening, like I'm going to back up over here so I'm not swallowing, like getting gross mouth noises into the mic, and the all these things, the lip smacks and all these other gross things that just get picked up or whatever. I mean, sure, you can mute, I guess, but it sometimes you can't. But yeah, it's one of those things that having good like audio hygiene. To your point, so like There are some podcasts I've listened to that. I'm like, dude, you gotta lean away from your mic and stop saying that, and like that it's really distracting. These things you pick up over time.
Yeah, but that's a great public service too about being a good guest. And I do feel like that was one of the other reasons I wanted to give this talk at Power of Narrative, which is a lot of print journalists, is like you can listen to the show that's invited you on and start to understand their approach, right? That's it, but you kind of need to have awareness of how audio works in order to understand the show.
Oh, for sure. From your eye and your experience of audio, and then the podcast boom that kind of started around 2010-ish, we'll say. What have you noticed in the arc of the podcast, be it interviews or narrative? Like, how would you characterize that arc from where that started at that point to where we are now?
Oh, that's a great question. Excuse me, I'm the cough. And it's been really interesting for me. So when I got a Nieman Fellowship in 2023, it was to study a lot of the origins of storytelling techniques and editorial processes and so forth that I had taken, from public radio into podcasting. So already like a lot of disruptions. And something that I noticed was because of all these constant disruptions, like a lot of lore has been lost or forgotten. And so once I started reading up on, kind of the rise of radio, especially in the United States, and how commercial it was for its first 50 years, and how many bizarre rules there were in terms of production, I started to realize what was happening to us in podcasting in this transition from broadcast to podcasting, and like seeing many, many patterns repeating themselves. So just a few of those patterns that I've seen repeating themselves are video is trying to stake a claim. It wants all the sort of audience loyalty and ad dollars of podcasting. And so YouTube has entered this space, and YouTube is a big pipe into people's homes. It just is.
Yeah.
Their homes, their phones, and so forth. But it's a visual medium. And so many of the patterns that happened, with commercial radio sort of getting eaten by television are sort of happening in weird, distorted funhouse versions with YouTube and podcasting. I don't think YouTube is trying to eat podcasting, but let's just face it, you can make a lot more money producing video ads than you can, audio radio ads. So there's an incentive to try to get everyone to migrate to video. Spotify is also doing this, trying to encourage people to go into video production. But then once you're editing a show for video, it's a very different prospect. I mean, human speech just doesn't edit the same way, even if it's a very quote unquote simple interview format.
Yeah.
But much less the narrative shows that I tend to work on. They are very hard to translate into video. So you see that kind of going on, and I'm like, just be aware of it. So I've written posts in my newsletter, Continuous Wave, about how bitter the first generation of radio producers were about what television did to their careers. Some of them went on to become screenwriters and so forth. So it's not like it was all bad. It's just they loved radio and they wanted to keep making radio, and the audiences loved them. And then they were all told, no more. It's all TV now. Too bad. So sad. Play records on the radio. And they were like, wait a minute. And so they were still bitter about it like years later. And I found that really fascinating. The other thing that's happening that's, I think, a very good development is that people have rediscovered long form audio, which, was very constrained for decades. So public radio, would have these little oases like This American Life, or, various documentary shows, or like the coveted 12-minute segment of All Things Considered once a month would run a long, 12-minute documentary from Radio Diaries or the Kitchen Sisters. But those were like years in the making, grant funded, special jewels. And so suddenly, like, all of that time constraint lifted with podcasting. And it turned out that the audiences were like there for it, like immediately.
Yeah.
The same audiences that the TV guys were like, no one cares about your long ass radio plays. They were showing up for it. They were discovering audio fiction. They were discovering serialized narratives, all of these things. And that is really gratifying, because when I was in public media, like as an editor, my job was to churn out 3-minute, 30 to 4-minute pieces week after week after week, just bunches of them. 3-minute interviews. Like, how much of a follow-up can you ask in a 3-minute interview with a 30-second introduction, Yeah, not much. It gets really shallow and formulaic and tedious. So I was immediately attracted to podcasting as a forum that you could experiment with. I just don't think people's attention is infinite. So you do have to earn it. And that's subjective and hard to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. What would you say, just as someone who's so steeped in this, are similar to what maybe musicians or music producers, they're hearing things that the average person doesn't hear? What are the average thing? Or what are the things that you're hearing that maybe I'm not hearing or the average listener isn't hearing? And that could extend to pet peeves of yours too.
Oh, God, don't get me started. I mean, there are certain things that are really hard to do in audio as a linear form, that you can only kind of hold one thing in your mind at once. So it's sort of, I liken it to, you're reading a scroll instead of a book, right? You're watching a scroll unfurl. So when that scroll suddenly needs to transition back in time, or, kind of like bring in a character's backstory, it's hard to do. So people keep reaching for these cliches, and I myself do it, and then I have to stop myself. It worked for like the first 10,000 times, and now you can't do it anymore. So like one very common transition is, so you start big, and then you're like in the present, stuff is blowing up, and then you're like, to understand how we got here, we have to go back to the beginning of time and then tell the story again. And I'm just like, I know what you're doing, and you got to find a better way to do it. I'm sorry. And then the other thing that it's more of an ethical issue, but taking this sort of faux innocent look at the world. I mean, it's true of tabloid journalism too, but it's sort of like can you believe what happened in this place? These bad people did these bad things. And then another person, was innocent and the crime was pinned on them. And you're just kind of like, and tell me what this all means, And so I think there is and it's interesting to find out now, because I didn't really realize this, that true crime was a genre in radio from the very beginnings, sort of like tabloid coverage of scandal trials and society things. And it was all done live, like in the courthouse, and people would write in with their theories and they were getting read on the air and like all of this stuff. So this tendency, this emotional kind of like valence of ours has been attached to audio from the very beginning. And now that it's lucrative again, it's kind of like being reinvented, and we're thrown all of these true crime shows, and we're supposed to subscribe and get like a constant feed of them and things like that. And it's just tough, because you can do journalism in that format as well. You can try to understand the criminal justice system, and you can try to understand the world. But absent that, if it's just people suffering, I find it really problematic. And I don't want to do it. I don't want to be editing those kind of shows for people's entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you identify as the ideal length, be it for, a narrative episode or an interview, like for your taste, or maybe it for your taste, let's just say that.
Yeah, I tend to find like a 30, 35 minutes, maybe 20 minutes for an explainer, because I'm just kind of like, I've edited a lot of explainer shows, and I feel like around 20 minutes, and that's including, kind of like warming up and the credits and so forth. You kind of explained one thing really well. And beyond that, you're going to get tempted to complicate it, bring in like side quests and all this stuff. And I don't know if I need all of that. I want to learn one thing. But for narrative, I think you need to meet people. You need to hear a kind of an A story and a B story, maybe interwoven. You just need a little more time with it. And if it's really complicated in some aspect of it, just needs more explaining. Somebody's got a really interesting backstory, or it's, part of a more complex narrative arc of the season, then, maybe you go to 45. Always when something comes in at more than 45, I'm like, what's going on here? I just don't trust it. You know what I mean? Now, that said, there's a whole other genre of super long podcasts where people, I think, want them just on in the background, like a radio chat show that they dip in and out of.
Yeah, like
those are generally not edited at all.
Yeah, like Hardcore History, like Dan Carlin's thing. Like he puts out maybe 1 or 2 episodes a year, but they're 5 hours long, and it's like, you kind of, you dip in and you dip out, and maybe you take a week to listen to it, or a month, and who knows. But it's a pretty wild take on the form to be like, we're not going to chop this up. We're just gonna, here it is. And it and there's an audience for that as well, and that's fine. But like Joe Rogan, just talking to people until they beg to go to the bathroom, I don't know, that's a whole different I can't abide by those
planet.
Those once we get north of an hour in a conversation interview podcast, like it's about when I'm ready to tap out. Because there's just other things to listen to and other things to enjoy. I don't want to spend my week listening to this one episode and, oh boy, you're putting out 2, 3, or 4 of these a week. Like, I can't do it, man. I'm out.
Yeah, but it's fascinating because, coming from radio where like 3 minutes, both musically and intellectually was the golden time length. And now to find that there's an audience for just like endless kind of like minimally edited material, and there's in fact an incentive to run more ads, to just like churn out more content. It's a fascinating experiment in sort of
for sure,
how much stuff people want.
It's wild.
Well,
and then there's the like something like Against the Rules, and you're working with Michael Lewis on that in the latest season. It wrapped a while ago, but it was a brilliant season on fandom and sports gambling. And just in working with someone like him, who is like an outsized person in narrative nonfiction, and here you're walking into on this wonderful podcast that you do. What's been your experience of editing Michael for a show like this, who brings his own, like, just a ton of experience in books, but to a medium that is not his firstborn, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really fantastic working with him. I mean, I feel like I learned so much from the way he writes, the way he characterizes people. And it's always been my job to kind of like get out of the way, but to also tell him when I think, like, I get it. Like, you don't have to keep explaining things that would work well on the page. It's sometimes like it gets across much more quickly in audio because there's subtext that is not on the page, right? So the way someone tells a story. So it's collaborative, and something that I figured out by working with, all of these magazine writers is that, like, they've had experiences, many of them, of being edited post final, So they've opened the page and seen a lead that they did not write. They've seen a transition, like, cut. They've seen, like, the last 4 inches, like, cut for space or whatever. And so they have, like, trust issues with editors.
Yeah.
Especially new editors, right? And so, and I don't think he would mind me saying his name, but Michael Spector, would come on really strong and be like, what do you mean? This sentence isn't... And I'm like, okay, Michael, you are going to have to say all these words with your own mouth into the microphone. This is your narration. I am making suggestions. I cannot make you say things. If you think this sentence that is taking me like several breaths to read is going to flow out of your mouth quickly, then, have at. It is your show. It is your book, audiobook. Literally, the relationship is completely different. I could cut maybe some audio in post, some narration, and that causes tension at times. But I try to be transparent about it. But, I can't make them say things that they don't want to say. So it's a different relationship, and it has to be collaborative. It just does. So once they can kind of understand that, I think they just like maybe enjoy it, because my job is to help them sound good in this medium. It's not to have them be my ventriloquist puppets. And in fact, if they are reading copy that I wrote for them just as a suggestion, and they take that copy because for whatever reason they're pressed for time, or, we're on deadline, or they're just like, I give up, then that's actually a failure in the whole process, right? Because it's not about them saying words that I wrote, unless they're reading. I don't write ads for them, but sometimes I'll write cross promos because I know that they just don't have the mental space to, promote another show, or even if it's another host in their network. So I'll write those things, and then I hear them read them, and I'm like, I wish you cared, but it's okay. Like, I would do the same thing if I got copy that was readable and it wasn't like my main focus. I would just read it. But it's not actually a success when someone else is reading your copy.
Yeah. And hearing the way, in your style, I'm almost reminded of the producer Rick Rubin, and like, because he famously said he's like not a knob guy. He's not like that kind of producer. He's more of like visceral, feeling the energy of the thing, and be like, maybe try this or do this a little differently, and dial, like, not turn dials up, but like, why don't you try to do that a little more or whatever. And he's more like finger pointing and kind of more of a coach. And
he's hearing.
Yeah, exactly. And I get that sense from you. I'm feeling like almost a very sort of a synchronicity there in the way you see your fingerprints and your coaching of a piece.
Yeah, I think everyone needs that, right? They need a thoughtful audience. They need that feedback, because it is very easy to get caught up in, sort of original intentions with a story or a song, or it's easy to get caught up in the knobs.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a piece this week for my newsletter about sort of like my standard for production, which is, do I need to know what this knob is for? Because if you open up a Pro Tools session now, especially, there are all these, plugins and consoles with lots of knobs. And when I was teaching audio, I was always like, don't touch that knob. don't touch that knob, because you can totally ruin your piece and then you don't know how to get it back, and so partly it's just my own tendencies. Like I am much more interested in the content than the sound in many ways, sort of like, what is the thing you're trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
The way that how you say it is important as well, but I'm not going to get caught up in like knob fiddling, because I feel like that is not my strength.
Yeah. Oh, that's really, it's really
Mm-hmm.
well put. And I can't wait to subscribe to your newsletter now. It's a Continuous Waves. Is that it? Or Wave?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's a lark.
Yeah.
It's my way of trying to process all of this research I did on the Nieman Fellowship and try to explain electronic media. It's like broadcasting is, especially network broadcasting, is pushing 100 years old now.
Mm.
It's actually more than 100 years old, but the big networks, NBC and CBS, were formed 100 years ago almost. And I feel like it's changed so much in that amount of time that it's really useful to read the scholarship and to go back, and also to read about how people describe the medium to themselves.
Mm.
Because just like you and me, they wanted to talk about how it worked,
Yeah.
how the craft works. And so people were doing that, from the 1920s. Some of it was technical. A lot of it was technical in the beginning. But then it became like, how do you talk to people that can't see you? Which is exactly the same question I'm asking and talking about with authors now. It's like the exact same problem. And they kind of nailed it in the 1930s. And I'm like, why didn't I know about these guys? It would have saved me so much trouble. Although I probably wouldn't have been able to absorb their work, because they were talking about live radio.
Mm.
And the very definition of a podcast is it's not live.
Yeah.
Right? It's pre-produced, it's put out there, and then you can access it when you wish.
For sure. Yeah. And so you've been in this a long time. Like, where's the juice for you still? Like, what keeps bringing you back to these stories and to keep working, aside from the paycheck, but it's just like you need to eat and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like, where's the energy and the juice for you in continually telling these kind of stories?
I mean, mainly it's what it's always been, which is the chance to collaborate with people.
Yeah.
And to help, sort of a mass of interviews and research. It may be documents, it may be archival audio or things like that, helping it cohere into a story that then people can access, and they can access at any point in time, right? So with Revisionist History, people are still accessing the first season that we edited like almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We did that on purpose. We wanted those stories to not be time-stamped. I mean, they still sound like of their era, but the stories you could listen to and be like, hey, tell a friend. So that's really fun and exciting, and it's also hard. So when we pull it off, I'm like, hell yeah, we did it again. Or we tried, at least we tried. And then now that I've spent more time kind of like studying audio's past and listening to the way radio was made in the past, I'm like, oh, there's this whole treasure trove of moves that we could be using, so I feel like it's emboldened me as an editor to suggest like little bits of stage drama, like not a whole production, but just like there were bits of the last season of Against the Rules that are staged, right? There's a moment where we recreate a Charlie XCX concert that the producer, who thought she was invited to as a sports betting VIP, she thought she was going to get to go to this thing, and then they disinvited her because they figured out that she wasn't actually a VIP, which was a high roller. And so she was just like, oh my God, I failed. We can't go to Charlie XCX. Michael's going to be so mad at me. And I'm like, well, why don't you talk about it with him and how the concert would have been and use your imaginations. And then her co-producer was going to go with her. I was like, can you sing one of the songs to Michael? And so she did. And then we created this whole scene around it. And it was really fun and weird.
Yeah.
It's like one of the weirdest moments I've ever edited. And I don't think I would have suggested that, except I was like, oh, all we have to do is get people to imagine the concert. She couldn't have recorded it anyway, because that would have given away her whole game as a secret journalist
Yeah.
and not a high rolling golf sports bettor. So we just recreated it, and it was fun, and there's a couple of other moments like that in the series. And that to me has been really gratifying, because I'm like, oh, this stuff still works. This stuff that people happened upon, this sort of imaginative, suggestive power of audio. I mean, I hear it in other people's shows too. I'm not the first person to do this. I'm just, now I have the courage, I guess, and the sort of sense of fluency with it, that I can just be like, yeah, just make it up. I mean, it'll be very clear to the audience that we're imagining as something. It's not real.
Yeah.
But let's have fun with it. And the amount of fun that we're having, I'm like, oh, we should be doing this a lot more. We have this superpower that we're not using, so let's go. Let's do it.
That's really cool. It's
I'm
like you
into
found this playbook,
Mhm.
and you're like, whew, and you like blow the dust off of it.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, we can do this. And it's just like,
Yeah.
that's so, it just, the energy you're bringing to it. Like, I can just see it on your face. Like,
Mhm.
this is cool. I can't wait to try this again with some other things.
Yeah. I think one sad thing is that, Americans especially, we are not accustomed to hearing audio drama. So we're not accustomed to hearing actors in our ears anymore. We're very sensitive to anything that sounds read or acted in a way that Europeans who've had audio drama continuously on their state broadcasters since the 1920s, they can handle it. But we get really mad when we hear reenactments in audio, which is hilarious because we have them on TV like constantly. Our reality shows are all staged. You know what I mean? Like, we have high tolerance for it in video, but in audio we don't. But at the same time, we can play versions of ourselves in nonfiction and have fun with it.
Yeah.
And the audience will immediately know that we're playing a game, and they'll get into it.
Yeah. It's just a matter of being like transparent about that, and like, this is what we're doing. Just like, we've built some trust over this season. Like, just kind of go with us on this. This is going to be fun.
Right. Yeah, it's delightful.
Nice, Julia. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, and as I bring these conversations down for a landing, I always love asking the guests, you in this case, for just a fun recommendation of some kind for the listeners, just like anything you're excited about that you feel like sharing with them. So I'd extend that to you.
Yeah, well, in the spirit of the sort of archival goodness, there's a show called Our Ancestors Were Messy, and the host, make sure I've got it right. Her name is Nicole Hill, and it's just such a delightful show. Like, so it's called Our Ancestors Were Messy, and she's taking stories from the Black press, especially scandals, and picking a sort of a storytelling partner and unpacking the story of the past with this other person who's got like little bits of it to read, but mainly they're just talking about it because it was gossip originally, but in a very fascinating social context, of striving, of social justice, of all of these, sort of debates and, larger than life characters in the Black press, depicted in the Black press of the time. The writers themselves have their own takes and personalities. And so she's bringing it to life with a different person every episode. And it's delightful. It's just fun to listen to. And when there's archival audio, they're using it, but she's got this whole, like, it's just well conceived. I'm like, oh man, I want to make this kind of show immediately. I admire it as a producer, but it's also just really interesting to listen to. So I highly recommend that.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
production.
Awesome. Well, Julia, this is wonderful to have this talk and get a sense of how you think about audio stories and editing them and producing them and everything. So this is just a whole lot of fun. So just thanks for carving out the time to do this.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. Awesome. You got a podcast in your neck. Thanks to Julia for coming on the show. When was the last time Sean William Scott was impersonated on any podcast? That's where that yes always comes from at the end of this. In case you didn't know, people of a certain age, I guess. Be sure to check out the podcast she's involved in at Pushkin and head to RadioWright.com to learn more about her and her work. And don't forget about the virtual Hippo Camp. And if you want to see me as a featured reader, the free featured reader, does that make me the headliner? Shit. Visit booksbyhippocampus.com to register and come join me and others August 16th, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, so let's not bury the lead. Kevin's doing better, though there's a bit more management involved. For those who might be attending this late, she partially tore her cruciate ligament in her knee. X-rays revealed only that partial tear, but then, unbeknownst to us, she has a extremely arthritic spine. So a lot of bone degradation and some disc inflammation, disc closing. It's pretty ugly, which is like a real cool surprise to find when you're like looking at one injury and they're like, oh, by the way, she basically has like back cancer or whatever. Not real cancer, but it's debilitating and will likely do her in eventually. And we don't know. It could be weeks, it could be months, it could be a year. I don't know. She's wagging her tail again, and which is nice to see. When we go out for bathroom breaks in the backyard, she has to be on leash for now, maybe indefinitely, maybe forever. She's been eating, even if that means I give her more soft food so it's more appealing to her. A little bit of, maybe it's a little junkier. It doesn't matter. I just need her eating. And she's been eating. She can get down into a squat for toileting, be it number 1, number 2. It doesn't appear to be laboring to do that, so that's really great. She's moving well, and I think the gabapentin is helping with the shoulder limping, which is probably more spine or like nerve related. And the carprofen is helping with the knee, which is more just musculoskeletal. Low skeletal. All in all, she's herself. And we'll keep working on her rehab. She might be able to go on the longer walks that she's used to on flat surfaces. You can tell she wants to go. And she's pretty bummed that we don't let her jump on the furniture anymore because any acute movement could result in a full tear of that cruciate, which will send a cascade of events and a lot of questions. And we don't want that. No tears this week. Next week, who knows? I guess that's what sucks about when they're this age is that it's very day to day. And when they're old, things can slip really fast. So they can slip quickly. And they can be great one day and then suddenly no. So the day-to-day stress kind of sucks. But she's doing okay. She's sleeping beside me right now. Seems pretty happy. All right. So what's with this universal journaling theory, UJT, which kind of sounds like a birth control device, but it totally isn't. I have a lot of notebooks. And I use a bullet journal for the daily tasks and general organizing, and that's pretty minimal. It's gotten kind of complicated over the years. His whole Ryder Carroll's bullet journaling system, he's got this. I feel like he's overcomplicated his once very simple system to maybe sell like the Bullet Journal University. It's like he's make more things to justify charging people more money for the shit. I still think he's a force for good, but I think things have gotten overcomplicated. That's my little soapboxing. Anyway, and I've kept a diary or journal nearly every day since 1997. And I've gone through a lot of versions of these Omera Chronicles, which is what I named it way back when in 1997. I also have this compendium notebook that serves as a diary and a phone book and a general task log. It's basically a bullet journal with contacts and stuff for the next book project. Paper all the way down. Since 2021, when I started my Field Notes subscription, because I love Field Notes, I used each packet of 6 themed 48-page notebooks as one collection or one edition of the Chronicles. And then, when those are all done, I wrap them up in a rubber band and file them away. It's a tight little package, maybe a little too tight. But I love it, in part because they store really easily in a Field Notes archival box. And it's just nice. They're lined up neatly, and you can see them, and it's cool. They're sprawled all over the place. But for years, I've wanted this universal journal theory that puts everything under one style of notebook. The better to streamline things. I thought that maybe I could combine the bullet journal with my daily journaling so I get my feels from the morning out. Then we see how the day proceeds and it's all together. This would likely mean that I'd go through probably 4 full bullet journals a year. I'm just forecasting or projecting. Right now I use one for every 2 years or so. I keep it pretty tight. It's pretty much just, the bullet tasks and various logs, but that's about it. So this morning I tried my usual journaling, the highlight of my day, in the bullet journal. And it was really cool. I numbered the entry, which at this point is number 4,281, and I wrote a page. In my current O'Mara Chronicle volume, I put today's date, the entry with a see page 165 in bullet journal, just to let you know, this is what happened on this day. Not that I really ever refer back to these things, but it's there anyway. It's not like you can't change and go back. There is this sort of infidelity that you feel like when you lock into one thing that you're cheating on the other, and you're like, I can't. Once you leave, you can't go back. But you're just inanimate paper. Of course you can go back. I already did that one time during this field notes run before going back to Old Faithful. It was just basically a bullet journal, size journal, 6x9 kind of thing. And then I went back because I was like, all right, whatever. I like the neat filing. What it really boils down to is I want to uncomplicate things. I'm the messiest person who wants to be clean. I'm the most cluttered person who wants to be desperately uncluttered. And so that's where all this stems from, is just this need to simplify despite constantly overcomplicating and unsimplifying things, complicating things. It's the worst. It's the worst. It's basically my brain manifest in physicality. It's awful. I mean, there are worse things in the world, but it still sucks for me on a minute-by-minute basis. Anyway, so I'm just experimenting with this journal, universal journaling theory. I've been seeking it out for a long time. And I'm just going to keep fucking around with it. Why not? I'm not much of a call to action guy, but drop me a line either on social or in the comments in Spotify. Lynn's over there on Spotify. She's the one who comments frequently over there. There are enough Spotify listeners. Go there and comment. I chime in too. It's kind of fun. There's not a whole lot going on there, so I can go in there and moderate, have a dialogue. What a world. Talking about journaling. Stay wild, see you never. And if you can do interview merch idea, see ya.